Welcome to ACC Nation. That's Will. I'm Jim. And our special guest is the publisher of Deacons Illustrated. That's Conor O'Neill. Thank you for joining us, Conor.
Pleasure to be on, guys. Thanks for having me back.
Anytime. Let's talk about Wake Forest basketball, football, and who knows what else is lurking around the around the edges here. Let's start out with basketball, man. This has been an exciting season. It's been a long time. It's been frustrating to see where it's been in the past, and all of a sudden we have this new coach on the scene. We've got this enthusiasm, and people are going, "Yeah, well, we'll see what happens." And but it's been this kind of subtle thing, and you just feel it growing. And here we are. Here's a team that in the latest bracketology, I think number 9 seed. And that's nothing to sneeze about. Right now, number 5 in the ACC. And definitely, I was looking at the scores on games and stuff and how close they were with Duke and, the game with Notre Dame. And I'm just thinking, wow, what a turnaround for this team. Tell us a little more about what you've seen since things got turned around.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this has kind of come a year earlier than I thought was going to be possible under Steve Forbes. You knew last year was going to be rough, just taking over a job in a pandemic. He had to cobble together a roster. He only had 2 guys on the roster when he took the job that didn't go into the portal. And only one of those is left here in his second season, and that's Isaiah Musius, who plays a huge role on this team. The transfer portal, though, and one-time first-time transfer eligibility has changed, and it's accelerated the timeline for the rebuild. You could argue that it's not even a rebuild at this stage. It's they've established something. Getting Alondas Williams, I mean, I am not saying this to diminish the talent evaluation of Wake's staff, but I think they struck some gold there that they didn't even know was possible. I don't think you can take a guy that scored 6.5 points a game in 2 years at Oklahoma and know that he is going to be the front runner for ACC Player of the Year in late February. But that's where we are. I think they knew they were getting a good player. I think they knew they were getting somebody that was not exactly used the right way at Oklahoma and was going to be able to blossom under the right coaching. But I don't know if anybody could have told you back in the summer that this was going to be the ACC Player of the Year and you wouldn't have gotten a crazy look in return. And then it's more than that. Jake LaRavia might be a first-team All-ACC player. He's certainly going to be, second team, I would think, is his floor for that. He comes from Indiana State. He was he played 5 at Indiana State. Wake Forest has used him as a small forward at the 3. He's been put in a great spot to succeed, and he's really capitalized on it. They got kind of a journeyman with the DMC, and they're kind of squeezing everything they can get out of him and Dallas Walton, a 6th-year 7-footer from Colorado. It's a brand new roster. I've kind of had to recalibrate on how I ask some questions, because asking about what they did last year is just meaningless. They have almost a completely new roster. So you can ask Jake LaRavia, hey, do you talk to the 3 guys that are still on the roster from last year about how bad they were? But what good is that going to do? It's really an exciting team to follow. And like I said, they're a year ahead of schedule, at least the schedule that I had in mind for them.
All right, Conor, I know you've been on the podcast a couple of times before, but this is the first time I've been able to talk to you. So I'm going to put you under the spotlight here, if I could get that to show up. But okay, at what point of this season did you realize that this team was for real?
It's got to be the Virginia Tech game. Their non-conference schedule was nothing special. That's putting it kind of mildly. Then they played 5 home games in the non-conference to open the season. I think one of them might have been in single digits, and it might have been an 8 or 9 point win. Then they went down and did the tournament in Northwest Florida at Steve Forbes' former JUCO, where he coached for 2 years. They played a good half against Oregon State. They choked away like a 20-point lead and then won that game in overtime. They looked terrible against LSU, but LSU was pretty underrated at that point. And Will Wade is going to have some dudes, right? Like that's just, he's going to have some strong ass dudes. Like he makes strong ass offers to kids. So then they came back and they won an overtime game against Northwestern in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, but that was kind of, it's Wake and Northwestern. Nobody's paying particular attention to that game as far as the challenge went. Their ACC opener, Virginia Tech. I mean, Virginia Tech obviously hasn't had the season that we thought they would, but at that point, I thought Virginia Tech, I think I picked them 3rd in the league. Wake went up there. It was the day of the ACC football championship. So your attention is still on football season. And like, this is the biggest Wake football game, one of the 2 or 3 biggest in program history. And the basketball team wins by 20 at Virginia Tech and just kept it was a 2 or 3 point game at halftime. And they just kept further distancing themselves in the second half. There was never really even a challenge from Virginia Tech as the game went on. And it was like, okay, it's 12 points with 8 minutes left. All right, they've kind of got a good handle on this. Then it's 15 with 6 minutes left, and it's like, well, this is getting into the territory where like it would take a collapse to lose this game. And then it's like it's 20 with 4 minutes left. They're going to run away with this thing. So that was kind of the eye-opening, like, okay, they're for real. They have it even when the competition gets pushed up a little bit, and they're not playing a VMI is decent, so I won't use them. A&T or Gardner Webb or Kennesaw State, I think, was in there. Like, they housed Virginia Tech in front of a sold out Castle Coliseum, and that was really the one where it's like they're for real.
And you kind of talked about some of the things, obviously this team is way ahead of schedule. You could probably end up with the coach of the year, potentially the player of the year. But there's not a whole lot of substance to that non-conference schedule. And it just felt like this was set up to, build confidence into this team and to just get some wins out of the gate. Now, I don't know what the rest of the season holds, and we'll get into that in a bit. And, if it ends up, biting them in the end and they don't make the tournament because of it, oh, well, but it's just a crazy successful season, no matter what.
Yeah, I had that discussion with somebody in the media about a week ago, and they were telling me that where Wake has gotten to now, if they don't make the tournament, it would be a disappointment. And, they'd have the non-conference schedule to blame for it. And it was kind of like, well, they had won 20 games at that point. So they've won 20 games. You look at where this program has been for the last 11 years and look at what they've done this year. Even if the wheels come off, and I don't think they will, but even if they do, I still think this is a successful season. I still think if they go 0-3 against whatever odds that would be and lose in the first round of the ACC tournament, they'd still be in the NIT. So you're still talking about getting to the postseason for the second time in 12 years. You're still talking about a 20-win season, which is more than they've had since either 2009 or 2010. I mean, it's still a good season in my book. It wouldn't be as good of a season as you would have thought was possible, but it's still a good season. And yeah, I mean, I think, I think it's ACC Player of the Year. I think it's ACC Coach of the Year. I've always, when I've had a ballot, I've kind of cringed at the notion of naming both of those awards to the same people from the same school, because I kind of have the thought, if you have the player of the year, then how good of a job have you done as a coach, really? Like, if you just have the best player in the conference, then you shouldn't have to do that good of a job as a coach. But I think coach of the year needs to be kind of a fluidly defined award. Like, does Steve Forbes get credit in kind of like a GM of the year for the job that they did in the transfer portal going back, 9 and 10 months ago? I think so. Other people could have different translations of coach of the year. I hate to define coach of the year just based on the preseason media poll, because everybody and anybody can vote in that thing and sway the scales way too much. But that's my 2 cents.
So you mentioned all the work they did in the transfer portal. Is this going to be a trend going forward, or is this more of what they needed to do this season?
It's funny you ask that. I think I hadn't had a chance to listen to Coach Forbes' appearance on Josh Graham's show today, but he actually, I think, did address that and said it's going to be fluid. And that's kind of the same thing that I talked to him. I had about an hour-long interview with Steve on the phone after last season ended, and kind of right in the middle of, they had picked up, I think Jake LaRavia was the only guy out of the portal that they had at that point. They might have added one more in there. But, he's not committed one way or the other to saying this was a 1-year thing. We're going to put, 80 to 90% of our effort into 4-year players in the future. He's not gone the other way and said, we're only going to take 1 or 2 freshmen and we're going to spend the other, however many scholarships we have available in the portal. He's going to, evaluate what's out there. He's going to take stock of the recruiting legwork that you can do before the portal craziness starts and you get, 30 to 50 portal entries a day, right around like late March and into April. I think that's the way to do it. I mean, I'm kind of, we're all new to this, right? Like the portal is just, I don't want to call it a Pandora's box, but this is just such uncharted territory for college basketball that you're going to be able to do what Wake has done this year and bring in 5 guys that can put you into the NCAA tournament. And that can really, I mean, we call it a rebuild because we don't really have any other name for it, but is it really a rebuild if you just bring in all new guys? Or is that, I don't know. It's all so uncharted and unprecedented that, we'll see how it plays out.
I just got to say one thing, Connor. This is the first time I've ever seen or heard you close to being speechless on a topic. So, now, when it comes down to voting for player of the year and coach of the year off the same team, I think you just have an aversion to being referred to as a homer. Okay.
I do. I agree with that. Yeah, I've caught myself in the past of maybe being a little too harsh on the teams that you cover. You tend to look at that team in spite of your best effort sometimes with more of a critical lens than the other 14 teams in the conference, 13 when we're talking football. But yeah, I don't look, I don't think I'll have a vote. So it's not like I'm giving away the farm here. I don't think I'm one of the 75 or 60 voters or whatever it is, but yeah, it's just a personal feeling of, if you have the best player in the conference, how good of a job did you do as a coach? Or did you just turn the reins over to the best player and let him take you to the promised land?
I think that's a very reasonable way to look at that too. But there is one point that you made about that, about being a manager and using that transfer portal effectively. That I think is a key to being a good coach, and that may be enough. At least in my mind, it would be to go ahead and cross over that line and say, okay, it's not just the player; it is what the coach has done. Now, I'm looking at the remainder of the composite schedule for the ACC, and I'm seeing Clemson, Louisville, and NC State on Wake Forest schedule. And surprise, surprise, ladies and gentlemen, the ACC tournament is Tuesday through Saturday, March 8th through the 12th. Guess how close that is if you haven't looked at your calendar. You two guys were talking about the possibility that, remote possibility that Wake Forest would not make it into the field of 68. I just react to this, Conor, and we'll react to it as well. I cannot see with the remaining games, regular season, unless there's an absolute collapse in the ACC tournament, that Wake does not get an invite to the field of 68. Aside from a total collapse, which I don't see happening, this team is going to be involved in March Madness.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I mean, they're on paper, their toughest remaining game is at Clemson. And that is wholly dependent, I think, on whether PJ Hall plays. And it doesn't sound, but based on Brad Brownell's comments on the teleconference today, it's kind of 50-50 up in the air. And we'll wait and see how he feels on Tuesday, and we'll wait and see how he feels leading up to game time on Wednesday night. So if PJ Hall doesn't play, then your toughest remaining game becomes so much easier. The Louisville game is about revenge. That is a game that Wake Forest, all the way back. I think that was December still on the calendar. It's a good league. That was before Louisville kind of imploded and Chris Mack was on his way out. It was not the same Louisville that was playing on the court, even like 2 and 3 weeks later. It was one of those ones where it was like, man, we didn't get that break in the schedule of getting those guys when the wheels had started coming off. But that was a game that Wake felt they should have won, even with Louisville still being in a relatively okay place at that point in the season. And then the NC State game, I mean, look, NC State has some talented players. That was a tight game in Raleigh. The 18-point score did not tell the story that night. That was a 1 and 2 point game coming down the wire. But you've got to think that Wake playing in its final home game, you figure that gives them that would be probably your chance to get to either 23, 24 wins. I think that they're in relatively good shape for those last two at home. So yeah, we're talking about a team that it seems like you don't want to give them the wins yet. You don't want to put the cart before the horse, but
oh, come on.
Yeah, it's shit. I mean, they're coming out of the tough stretch, right? They're coming out of a stretch where they played 1, 2, 3 in the conference standings. The Miami game was a great college basketball game that came down to the wire. The Duke game, you're down 19 in the second half and you come back and tie the game and only lose on a tip in with 0.4 seconds left. And then you beat Notre Dame in another great college basketball game in your home arena.
Yeah.
So they've kind of proven themselves. They've proven that, not only have they been good all year, but they're improving. They're rising to meet the challenge of playing games that matter in February. And I can't see why that wouldn't translate into playing well in March.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Of course, that Duke game came as a result of one of Connor's favorite things, the replay. had to throw that at one end there, Conor. But
get that in there.
It was perfect timing. But no, I agree with everything he said. And I think what will really help Wake is some of these teams that they've beaten that are on the bubble, like Virginia, who they beat in Charlottesville. They have an opportunity on Wednesday night to beat Duke and sweep the season series. Virginia winning against Duke will only help Wake Forest in terms of their resume as well. Same with North Carolina. They beat them and they're on the bubble. They could really use the win. And same with the opponent they face on Saturday in Notre Dame. They need Notre Dame to continue to play well as the season plays out. That's only going to really help them in terms of the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I agree with Connor as far as barring collapse, they're in at this point.
Yeah, I think that's I don't think there's anything wrong with being optimistic here. I tend to be the glass half full type of guy. I'm looking at this team and saying it's 3/4 full at the very least. And I don't see anything collapsing there. That's exciting. I love to see that because I watched the struggles of this team for the last couple of years and just kept thinking to myself, how long is it going to be? Let me ask you a quick question here because you brought up Louisville. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some kind of rivalry set up here, or is a budding rivalry between Wake Forest and Louisville. It's not only basketball, but it's also football. There's some kind of bad blood or something going on here. What's the deal?
Yeah, I don't know if it's there as much in basketball. It's definitely there. The people in the football program would argue that it was extinguished with Bobby Petrino's firing. The WikiLeaks died with Bobby getting canned after in the middle of a 2-10 season. I don't think there's any love lost between the current staffs. Maybe that's just a misplaced hunch, but yeah, I don't think that they're all that tight. I don't think we're ever gonna get. I mean, the WikiLeaks stuff was a once in a decade storyline of betrayal and espionage, but. I don't know if we'll have anything quite like that, but I do think you're onto something. That it's a good little rivalry. They're in the same division. Who knows how much longer we'll have divisions in the ACC, but for as long as they're both in the Atlantic, we'll have some fun with it. And yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy of schools, with Louisville being kind of toward the bottom they're not toward the bottom. They are on the bottom of the ACC's academic requirements, and Wake Forest is very much not at the bottom of that. So yeah, there's an interesting contrast of academia at play there also.
Indeed. Let's make the transition now to football and talk a little bit about what's going on there. And I'm going to let Will take the reins at this point, since I'm going to have to have a swig of coffee to clear my mouth out after you mentioned Petrino. So.
All right, before we get into that, let me just kind of bridge the two here. You're obviously seeing a successful basketball season. We saw the football team make the ACC championship game, just having a great run really under Dave Clawson. Just for this year, just because there's been so much success with the basketball team, how much fun has it been to cover Wake Forest athletics?
It's been fun. I'm a little, I'm not all that gung-ho in the answer, just because with extra attention and these extra wins comes the bigger media entities, and it's sometimes disappointing to see the access that they're given and compare it to the access that you're given. I understand it's part of the game, and it's I get it, but I don't have to like it. So that's kind of the one thing that would hold me back on that. For an example, like Sam Hartman never talked to the media during the week of football season. It was always he's too busy. He wants to focus on football. But then there's a big 2,000-word feature on ESPN where they clearly got him one-on-one, and there's a big 3,000-word feature on The Athletic where they clearly got him one-on-one. So it's like, okay, so he's not too busy, he's just too busy for you. So that's a little disappointing. That hasn't happened as much in basketball. I mean, as good of a season as the basketball team is having, it's not like they're knocking down the door to be a top 10 team like the football team was. They debuted the CFP rankings at number 9.
Yeah, so we'll get more into the team here. I think, even though we talked about Sam Hartman's back for, I think he's he's the new Kenny Pickett of somebody who's been around forever, but still a good quarterback. I think where I want to look at is a running back position. Obviously, Christian Bill Smith is transferred out. He's now in South Carolina, but behind him there was still some really promising players at running back. Justice Ellison, Christian Turner, both young kids who got plenty of playing time this year. How do you see them stacking up in terms of carries? And is there anybody else that might see some work at running back as well?
I think it'll be Christian and Justice as kind of your 1-2. And I would, if I know Dave Clawson the way I think I do, it'll go through spring and fall camps to sort out which one of them is the starter in game 1. And if you read into which one actually starts, then that's wasted energy. I mean, it's Wake Forest is always going to split the carries among running backs evenly. This past year, it was between 3 of them. I think Dave prefers to have 2 of them. And so I think those would be the guys that you would tag as, these are our 2 guys. The third one would be Quentin Cooley. We saw a little bit of him at the end of the season. They had some guys nicked up. Christian Beal Smith missed a few games. I always forget there are 2 Christians there. It's really fun when they'd go split backs and you'd have Christian and Sam in the middle.
Extra blessed in the backfield.
Right. Yeah, if only Sam's last name was like Holy Man instead of
right.
Quentin Cooley showed some burst. He is, it was always fun to write about Wake's running backs last year because all 3 of them, Beal Smith, Turner, and Justice Ellison, were all basically the same size, like 5'10", 200 pounds. I think Quentin Cooley, if I recall correctly, is listed at 5'8", 220. He is very much a bowling ball running back.
Yes.
But you run that slow mesh and you run up the middle. You need somebody that can take some hits, whether they have the ball in their hands or whether they don't have the ball in their hands. So he could be valuable. They've got guys behind them. Running back is very much a position with Wake Forest that they want to get as many in the program as they can. They don't want to take scholarships away from other positions to have 10 running backs. But it's a position that they see as if you're not in the rotation of, the top 2 or top 3, you're going to help on special teams because you're going to have a body where you can run down the field really fast on kickoffs. You can line up and block somebody for 2 seconds on a punt and then run down the field and make a tackle. Like they really want to use their running backs on special teams. And so they've got 3 young guys. One, Will Towns was in the program last year and got in there on a couple special teams. I think he stayed under the 4-game redshirt threshold. Then they're bringing in 2 guys. One, Damon Claiborne from up in your guys' neck of the woods, Virginia. I think he went to, it was Prince William or King William High School. They won a state championship, I think, this year in the 2A. And then Tate Carney, and that last name should sound familiar because he's the younger brother of Cade. So,
Carney, yep.
so they're bringing in 2 more running backs, and that's actually the reason that Christian Beal-Smith had to transfer. Was he told the coaching staff all season that he was going to be gone. This was going to be his last season, and then after signing day in December and before their bowl game, he shifted course and said he wanted to come back, and the coaching staff had to tell him that they didn't have space for him. They had brought in 2 running backs, telling them both that Christian Beal-Smith was not going to be here anymore, and that's going to open up, a little bit of a window for you to come in and play. And so it was an unfortunate circumstance that Christian ended up having to transfer. And, there's kind of, I think both sides want each other to do well on that side of the transfer. I don't think there was any bad blood left.
So I know people who follow the ACC closely know this, but maybe not on the national level know this, but Wake does a really good job of developing wide receivers ever since Dave Clawson's been at Wake. And, this has been no exception after last season. I think Ja'Cory Roberson is gone, but everyone else is back. Plus the big, getting Donovan Green back healthy is just only going to make this wide receiving core that much better.
Yeah, it's funny because, they've gotten some project type guys in there and turned them into NFL players with Scotty Washington and Alex Bachman, Greg Dortch even. Now they're getting guys that aren't as much of projects. Like, every high school kid that comes into college, unless they're going to, unless they're like a top 20 recruit, there's going to be some polishing needed. But Wake has really made a living in getting the diamond in the rough receivers, teaching them for 2 or 3 years, and then having them explode. Now Donovan Green came in as a 4-star recruit. Like, Donovan Green, by the time he was a contributor by the end of his freshman season. It would have been really interesting to see last year, if he had been healthy, if A.T. Perry has the breakout season that he had. But now that A.T. Perry is broken out in the way that he did, now you're going to add Donovan Green to that mix. You've got 2 guys on the outside that are kind of horses for you. You still have Taylor Morin, who can play outside or he can play the slot. Keyshawn Williams, I mean, Ja'Cory Roberson is the only thing that kept Keyshawn Williams from having maybe 700 or 800 yards last season. I mean, Keyshawn Williams is really primed to be the next in line of the slot receiver tradition that's kind of been established in the last 5 years. So, and they're bringing in one of their highest rated recruits ever, Wesley Grimes from the Raleigh area. He was getting offers in the season from, I think he picked up a Notre Dame offer. He picked up a UNC offer, and he stayed committed. He committed in early September and stayed with Wake Forest through the season that they had. So I would not rule out some early contributions from him.
Well, I tell you what, a lot of excitement going on at Wake Forest in both basketball and football. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Now, Aaron Fitt from D1 Baseball has been our guest several times. We've talked about Wake. Aaron has always been sold on Wake Forest for the last couple of years, and he always ends up a little bit disappointed at the end of the season. Tell us a little bit about what to expect from Wake Forest baseball this season.
So I think you've still got to have some tempered expectations. They lost a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. It's so far, it's so good. They swept their opening weekend. They won 2 blowouts, and then they won a close game on Sunday, a 6-4 game where they had to come back from down 2 runs. It's a team that spent a lot of the last 9 months not working on anything X's and O's wise. I don't even know what X's and O's in baseball would be. they spent a lot of time on team chemistry and team culture. Last year, I can remember it like it was yesterday. They swept Pitt in the last series of the season. They knew that they were already, their fate had been decided. They were going to be one of 2 ACC teams that didn't go to the league tournament. And, you know, it was kind of like this, all right, good job. We won in a sweep. So at least the season doesn't have the most bitter feeling possible, but it was still such a bitter feeling. And Tom Walter told us in the post game that they needed to trim the fat, and they had too many guys in the dugout that were not bought into the team concept. And so they really overhauled the way that they approached the off season. Of course, in college baseball, there's not really an off season until you come back onto campus because everybody goes and plays summer ball and that kind of thing. So when they got them back in the fall, it was a conscious effort to build a little more team bonding and, you know, get guys comfortable, get the upperclassmen comfortable with the freshmen, and vice versa, that kind of thing. They're still talented. Like they still have, I mean, Brock Wilkin, the third baseman, I seems like he's going to be maybe a top 10 or top 20 pick next year. He's still a sophomore. They've got a young rotation, but they're promising. They've got other hitters in the lineup. I mean, they had a freshman who had a great first weekend. He's taken over at first base for Bobby Seymour, which is big shoes to fill. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season just because of where their expectations had been for the last few years and the level of talent and how short they fell for where they should have been, and compare that to what they do this year.
Looking forward to it. It should be fun. I know the baseball season is just getting underway, so we'll keep an eye on what Wake Forest does this season and whether Aaron's previous investment in the Deacs is going to pay off this season and in the future. That's always going to be fun to watch. Our special guest has been the publisher of Deacons Illustrated, Conor O'Neill. Conor, thank you as always for coming by, joining Will and myself and talking to ACC Nation fans about Wake Forest.